Good afternoon, friends. Am I audible? Great. So, couple of weeks back, World Intellectual Property Organization, or what we popularly know as WIPO, has come up with their recent study and the ranking, which is called as Global Innovation Index 2024. And the good news for all of us is that India is ranked 39th on the Global Innovation Index among 133 economies all over the world. For us to be happy, that is a huge jump from the 81st position which we had 10 years back to the 39th as an innovation nation. The key insights, if you get into the report, it talks about we are the first rank among lower middle income economies. We are the first rank in South and the Central Asia. We are the fourth largest science and technology cluster in the world. And the strong performance is driven by primarily the factor of the intangible asset intensity. That means the overall contribution of the intangible assets in the India's GDP. When we talk the good points about it, obviously some of the lagging factors, if you look into it, the obvious ones are on the infrastructure part, the obvious ones are on the human capital part, but at the same time, there are certain surprising aspects also. What are they? The aspects which are related to our institutions, the aspects which are related to the linkage between the institutions to create the IP or to create the innovation ecosystem. India's IP ecosystem has been very complex interplay between the innovation and enforcement. When we want to enforce the IP for the protection, same time we want the technology to be available to all, right? And that is the paradox which we are going to discuss here with our esteemed panel. And we'll try to go beyond the obvious part of it. I'll try to delve into the why behind the what and how to navigate forward. So, from my side, from all of us, let's welcome Dr. Hemang, Anil, and Archana as part of this panel discussion. So, let me just start this panel discussion. Hemang, this is for you. We talk about India's IP contribution increasing to 84,000 with a yearly growth of 24%. We also claim that we are the IT capital, we are the startup capital, and we are also the GCC capital of the world. But have we cracked this code of why? What is that one compelling reason? What is that compelling reason for me to file an IP in India?
Thank you, Palash, and thank you everyone for being here. Before I start, I have to give a boring disclaimer that I'm here in a personal capacity. I'm not a lawyer. Okay? The nature of the topic is such that you have to give such disclaimers. Why to file IP is, I would say, you go back to your IP as a business strategy. I think that is something which every corporation needs to keep in mind. The thing is, you said about GCCs, and today I was just before our panel, I was having a conversation with a mid-sized company that is a GCC, and it has aspirations to become an ER&D center. And this is the story of many Indian companies as well as MNCs that have established out here. They all are moving up the value chain. They're all innovating. They're all moving from service into product or product plus service. The thing is, how do you firstly track innovation? How do you measure it? IP gives you a great way to measure it. So that's one reason to do it. But the other important reason, which many companies do not always realize, is that IP at the end of the day is an asset. A lot of companies tend to look at IP as a cost, that hey, here is a cost outflow from my cash balance, but what you're generating in terms of patents and other IP rights is an asset at the end of the day. And that asset can be monetized. Now, whether you look at it in terms of valuation basis, whether you look at it in terms of licensing and monetization, or whether you look at it as a transfer or a sale of IP asset. But that's the other revenue-based reason to file IP. So two reasons for you, Palash. One is it's a great way to measure and track how well you're doing on the innovation engine. But second is, it is an asset at the end of the day, and that should be a core part of your business strategy.
Okay, thanks. So, Anilji, is the same question to you because we know that you were part of that committee formed by the government of India, which has formulated all those actions, which has given us the jump 39th. So, do we still have the answer of that why? Why I should be filing an IP in India?
I think this is part of a broader question. So I think coming to your previous comment, yes, I think I was part of a committee, disclaimers aside, some years ago, and we did suggest many measures across the various factors, parameters, including education, infrastructure, which you talked about, because it's a holistic thing, and thankfully, much of that was actually adopted, and we are seeing the change. And now from some 80s ranking to now late 30s, I think is a result of all the actions taken both at the government level as also at the institutional level. And with regard to your question on why, I say why not, because as Hemang said very correctly, because the kind of companies that we are here and the way they are migrating from simple services to the products, I think that is an important reason for them to file in India. Besides monetization and besides being an index of innovation, it is also to be understood that as a part of a business strategy, this can also be a very strong defensive tool.
So, Archana, I think everyone has talked about the IP as an asset, and I think this brings the question, you being the leading IP firms of India. If I buy a piece of land in Bangalore, I know that I can protect and monetize it, and that's the reason I can call it as an asset, right? Now, in India, can you really call IP as an asset, and what are the different ways? Is it really easy to protect it? I'm not sure what is the general opinion, but we feel that it's difficult to protect it. What do you say?
So I think over the last couple of years, and I would just go back to the national IPR policy, which was first formulated in 2016, and looking forward from that day onwards, at different stages and maybe in a staggering approach, the government has taken a lot of steps to enhance the filing or encourage innovation in India, and at the same time convert them into an asset, which means a patent protection. At the same time, what the government has done is obviously bringing about changes in the legislation, but also providing some concessions, particularly to startups in some areas of technology, particularly, I would say DeepTech, although that doesn't find place in the legislation, but it does find mention in several of their IPR policies and several executive orders that they have passed. So these concessions that have been granted by the government, which includes less fees, expedited examination, the conversion from an innovation to an asset can happen very quickly.
And just a question in the same relation, because most of us come from the IT capital, there is an assumption or there is a general understanding that a software cannot be filed as an IP, especially in India. When it comes to other parts of the world, let's say US or UK, it's much easier, but a software cannot be filed as an IP. So I'd want to know your opinion as an expert that how feasible it is for us to have a software as an IP in India.
So that is certainly, there is a legislation that obviously says that software per se is not patentable, but that's a perception because courts' intervention now, including the parliamentary debates and government intervention, have actually cleared the cloud over this perception that softwares can't be patentable. There's certain prerequisites for softwares to be patentable, and once those are met, I don't see any reason why we cannot have patentability over software. So this misnomer or misconception that software per se are not patentable is in a way correct, but to say all softwares are not patentable is not something which is, which is a correct position today.
Okay. Hemang, your opinion?
So in my prior hat, I had a lot of experience with IoT and deep tech startups where a number of them, let's say, would call themselves as IoT developers. So in their minds, they were writing pure software, and a lot of them would have this assumption that I cannot just protect my work through patents. And then when you sit and work with them and you look at the architecture that they were doing, a lot of that was software plus hardware interaction, that they were using a lot of sensors, they were working on optimizing some compute engines. So it was better in their cases to prove this software plus hardware interaction and thereby increase their chances of patentability.
Okay, so since we are talking about the startup part, now nasscom's last report and today's morning session, we assess and claim to have more than 3,500 deep tech startups. But when we get into the details, we see that in the last 15 years cumulative, 900 odd patents have been filed by all the deep tech startups cumulatively. This number, added to it, let's say the per million population, we say that 28 patents filed in India per million population, as comparison with the leaders in the space, which is around 1800. So like we are 160th or they are 60 times ahead of us. This actually brings a big question here that me being a startup, for me, first customer, product market fit, all that gets the precedence. Where exactly this IP comes into the picture, and is there a playbook based on your experience working with so many startups and Anilji's experience working as part of the MD of FIIT? What is the playbook and what is that? And we would want to know some of those success stories and the real examples also.
It's a very important question, and I'm happy to see Dr. Junjunwala here. I think one of the great success stories that we can look at in terms of incubation and playbooks is by looking at the startup that IIT Madras, as an example, has been incubating. The common thread that these startups, which firstly have an importance of IPR, and if you look at how well they scale up, is that their lifetime tends to be a bit longer compared to the other startups. Because firstly, they are very strategic. From day one, they're asking that, am I solving an important problem? Because only when you solve important problems, those answers to that will lead to different IP rights that you will register. And in their hunt, they are always trying to solve for a better problem, which drives up the value of the product that they're creating, or for that matter, even the service. It's so, a playbook has to be from day one that the company has been found. They have to look at what are the opportunities that we are looking at in terms of gaps that are there in the existing products in the marketplace, or if they are trying to look at different ways of solving those issues, what could be potential opportunities.
Okay.
Number of times startups will look at, let's say, I have released my product with this specific approach, and in the race to do that, they will have looked at maybe 5 or 6 different solutions. But for factors such as time, cost, other things, those options were not considered. It's fine if they didn't make it to the product. However, each of those was a potential patentable opportunity. So I think having that mindset from the get-go that hey, we will be creating a portfolio of these IP assets, I think that is crucial. And the startups which have done this thing, one example of such a startup that I've seen firsthand is from the get-go, they had their mindset. This was a startup developing a radar solution for automotive industry. They had a portfolio of 25 odd combination of India plus US patents. They started a collaboration with a large company, which ultimately led to an exit. And the core reason for that exit of being acquired by that larger company was because of the IP portfolio that they had. So I think that's the kind of mindset, and we are seeing more of such startups. And the other challenge over there is marketing, right? That these exits do happen, but for whichever reason, they are not in the mainstream media. So we tend to be unaware about them. So that's another area for us to work on.
Okay. Anilji?
Yeah, I think he said it all, but I think if I have to add on to that, now in terms of the numbers that you mentioned, so earlier on, particularly with regard to tech companies in India, of course, when we talk of IP as a strategy or IP as a portfolio, I think we have to understand it's not only the formal IP which is there, there is also informal IP, something which is not formalized, not protected in the true sense of the term. That's why you see that discrepancy. It's only now onwards that whenever there is now institutional grants, the government grants which are coming to startup companies, particularly the tech companies, I think they're the emphasis on creating your own IP, formal IP, protecting your IP, and whether it's about their own use or subsequent monetization, whether on takeover or maybe having a differentiated market presence. So all of that is contributing to more and more startups today contributing to formal IP or protecting their inventions by patents or copyrights or design registrations. But at the end of the day, please understand, when it comes to startups, plain startups who are sometimes resource constrained, for them to manage their IP in the way which larger companies can, so there are two challenges. One is the cost, because it's difficult to maintain, and second is the fear of appropriation of their IP by the large companies in the absence of proper defensive strategies.
Okay, so Archana, I mean, if you would want to add that for a startup, how to really protect my IP?
So I think, there are two parts to this question, and maybe I've already dealt with. One is obviously creating an asset. So one is creation of an asset, which is through a patent filing or securing a patent protection. And that obviously increases security and assurances for future investors to kind of, put in money into your innovation or your startup. The second is, once having acquired that asset, you can use that asset, which I would call it as a patent or an IP, to convert it into a business model. Now, the business model can be by either, entering into a licensing arrangement, which is a very good option like TLAs, and some kind of a collaboration with it could be a fund, it could be another larger company. The other is enforcing that patent through the larger companies, because you have certainly, by getting a patent, you've created a niche for yourself, and you certainly do have a competitive advantage over it. Once having done that, approaching the court, and there's always a kind of a fear that if I enforce my patent, it's going to be very, very expensive. It's an expensive proposition. It's a long drawn battle, which will kind of eat into my resources. Times have certainly changed now. So because patents are now under a commercial litigation, reduced timelines. Having said this, what's more important in commercial litigation is something which is known as mediation and arbitration. So when you're looking at a business model, you can enforce your patent with the objective of trying to get some kind of an arrangement with the company against whom you've enforced your patent. It could be a big company or a large company. You could get into a royalty, you could get into some kind of a settlement with that company. And without giving out the names, for instance, there was a very small startup company. I wouldn't even say it was a startup, it was actually an individual who kind of created a social media platform for designing some social media pictures. They filed a litigation against a very large multinational US company. And at the end of that, the litigation did not even see the full life. Maybe in a couple of months, 6 or 7 months down the line, there was a out-of-court settlement because they went in for mediation, because courts do now encourage mediation. So the choice is obviously of the startup, reduces assurances, it brings down the risk heavily, because once having a granted patent and an asset in your favor, there's always a risk for the other people to kind of enter into that domain.
Okay. So when it comes to innovation, the innovation gets into the value domain only when it reaches from the lab to market, right? And technology transfer plays the most important role in that. So I would want to pick up your brains, all three of you, that how to ensure that we are able to access the global markets, at the same time can protect the IP based on your expertise on the different areas. So Anilji, coming to you, IP management in academia, and especially you were heading the transfer of technology also as part of your role. So we want to understand that how this transfer of technology to generate the value can work.
Let me twist it a bit, and first of all, you're right. I think we need very efficient technology transfer organizations. If I talk in terms of academia or in the context of academia, it is there. But the question is, are there sufficient technology transfer organizations in the country first? Yes, there are few of them, NRDC, BCIL and stuff like that, which are outside of the system because they are legal entities by themselves. Now, coming specifically to academia, for example, I was associated with IIT Delhi. We had one of the foremost technology transfer organizations in the country. And there are other IITs and maybe other universities who have some similar setups. But the question is, while the mandate is very clearly laid out for them, the question is, are they in a position to manage IP the way it should be, more particularly with regard to protecting IP? That is capturing the ideas, the IP in the institution, and how well they are able to create value out of them through monetization. Or maybe whether it's giving, licensing it to startups or to large companies, be what as it may, the main issue that, or the main challenge that has been faced by these technology transfer offices has been lack of effective or qualified people who can do the job. And I have no hesitation in saying that we have very few, very good professionals who can manage technology transfer offices. Thankfully, there have been certain programs of the government where a breed of new people, what is called as RTTPs, Registered Technology Transfer Professionals, are being created who can understand the nuances of technology transfer, help and monetize the IP created in many institutions.
Okay. Archana, how about the licensing or the taxation issues? Are they such a big hindrance?
So obviously this is going to be a state issue, and when it comes to taxation related issues, every state has to kind of give those concessions for monetization or valuation of your IP when it comes, because obviously it comes into your balance sheet. And when you are doing that valuation, I would probably kind of take, what Dr. Wali said to the next level is that when you do have an asset and when you're looking at a technology transfer, of a technology of a startup, maybe what we are still looking at, and there have been several deliberations at the government level where we create an IP exchange platform. Okay. And what an IP exchange platform usually does is, and it's worked successfully in many countries, for instance, Hong Kong, Singapore, for many, many years it's worked very successfully, is where given the large scale of innovations happening in India and the large number of smaller startup companies, you have all your IP included on that platform, which kind of attracts investors, not only in India, but even outside India, to help you to kind of, whether it's technology transfer, whether it's kind of investing in the company, or whether it's trying to, scale up that entire, the innovation or the project.
Okay. Hemang, any last word of wisdom from all three of you?
Sure, I agree with what Anilji and what Archana just shared about how we can enable tech transfer. It's important to realize that it's a patient capital game, right? Because you can't, let's say, start a tech transfer office and hope to have results like in the next month, right? It takes a number of years to get it done. And the other thing is, I've seen some websites where they say, we have the following patents, and there'll be a list of patents. Rarely you'll find anyone who can just read those and say, okay, I can adopt this into my product, and that's how the tech transfer will work. That's a wrong assumption. It needs maybe a team, maybe some professors, maybe the folks who have worked on that innovation to work with the transferee, that will lead to a collaboration for effective tech transfer to happen. And again, this ties back to my earlier point that this requires patience and good amount of investment of certainly time, if not money, to get tech transfer up and running.
Okay. From you, Archana, Anilji, the last 30 seconds.
Having kind of worked with several of the large companies, I think when we do talk of having this IP platform exchange and what Hemang just said, just having patents on your website or things of that kind, it has worked extremely well for several of these telecom countries, telecom companies, global telecom companies, because it's mandated for them to have all their, what we call standard essential patents, right there for prospective licensees to approach them to obtain licenses. So adopting the same philosophy or the same methodology, it could just prove to be very useful tool in order for technology transfer.
Having worked in large companies, having worked with large number of startups, and also having worked at the academia, I've come to this belief that IP, in fact, it's a common belief that IP strategy is part of the business strategy of an organization. Whether to protect, how much to protect, where to monetize and how to monetize, again, is a question which has strategic implications, both tactical and strategic implications for an organization. Thank you.
Thank you. So
I'll just kind of add one last thing is maybe it's a very, a patented question, answer, is that when you do look at numbers and when you look at the numbers which are published by the government as of now, a large number of these innovations, whether it's AI, IoT, are being done by universities and academia. The question is then, do there actually, whether they're startups, they could be individual. It's basically a conversion from paper and to convert it into a product. So that collaboration from the government or maybe private public funding has to be an important tool to kind of convert it from from what we call as just being a patent to an asset.
Okay. Thanks, Hemang, Anilji, and Archana for the candid contribution to discuss about the complexities and contradictions around the India's IP and what we call it as the IP paradox. I'm sure that with the collective effort from all of us, from the policy lawmakers, from the practitioners, and the IP system which we are trying to make more efficient and effective by adding capability in terms of the IP discovery, IP management, IP monetization, we are on the right path. But at the same time, one important aspect which all of us have to really understand is that IP creation should not be a goal. IP is a means to achieve the larger goal or the larger good. And just tracking IP probably could become a vanity metrics for all of us. So I'm sure that we are on the path with a collective effort. Our IP paradox will be able to transfer into the synergy of protection to profit to the prosperity for India. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.